What's going on, movie fans? This is episode 5 of the Real Takes podcast here on WSVC Radio. I'm your host, Dan Sisk, and I'm back to review the new release this weekend, along with Wicked. I'm not reviewing that, though. But I'm here to review Gladiator 2. This is obviously the sequel to the 2000 classic starring Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix, and directed by Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott returns to direct this sequel, along with a new writer. David Scarpa is the name of the writer. He's written for a number of Ridley Scott movies in the past. He wrote All the Money in the World. He wrote last year's Napoleon, which I thought was pretty cool. He's a decent writer, but yeah, so there's a lot to talk about with this movie. Let's get started with overall general thoughts. So, important context. The original Gladiator is one of my favorite movies. A lot of people always say, that there's let's say, a lot of rivalries. So you're either a Star Wars person or you're a Star Trek person. You're either a baseball person or a football person. I've always been, in the war between Braveheart and Gladiator, I've always been a Gladiator person. Braveheart's great, but Gladiator is definitely the movie that I prefer. It is one of my favorite movies. I think Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix's performances are outstanding. And I just rewatched it over the past week to prepare for this sequel. And it is just a truly extraordinary movie. It is so well made. It's well paced. The acting, like I just said, is extraordinary. The directing is stunning. It is absolutely one of Ridley Scott's best, right behind Blade Runner and Alien. So I was really, really excited for Gladiator 2. Anyone who knows me knows that I've been excited for Gladiator 2 the moment that it was announced. However, I would be lying if I said that I wasn't a little cautious, because as we all know, a lot of legacy sequels these days end up being complete and utter garbage. So I was really worried that Ridley Scott, in an effort to get a big paycheck, would just cash in on the Gladiator name and not really have a story worth telling. But I'm happy to report that Gladiator 2 is a perfectly respectable sequel to the original Gladiator. It is definitely better than most legacy sequels that are made these days. And I actually feel that it is a very refreshing change of pace when it comes to modern franchise filmmaking, because it follows a lot of those similar tropes, but it actually does something kind of interesting with it. And again, overall, I thought it was a really, really solid movie. I wouldn't put it in my top 10. I believe I put it in my ranking at number 11. But it's a really, really solid movie. So let's dive into the nitty-gritty. We'll start with the acting. So Paul Mescal is the lead here, and he plays Maximus's son, Lucius. He's actually extraordinarily well cast. I'd seen a number of reviews going in that were critical of his performance, but I actually thought he was really, really good. The character is a lot more restrained than Maximus's character was in the original. Obviously, Maximus was very bombastic. He was arrogant in a good way. He had true love for Rome. And his son does not share that love for Rome and has a lot of pessimism towards Rome's future. So you need an actor who can have the command of Russell Crowe, but lack the grandeur. And I thought that Paul Mescal was brilliantly cast in this regard. I thought he was excellent in this movie. He bulked up to execute the action sequences, and I thought he did a great job with the action too. I thought he was really, really good. The primary supporting performances are from Denzel Washington and Pedro Pascal, and I thought both of them were really good too. Denzel Washington, obviously, acting legend, Oscar winner, the whole 9 yards. He's a very, very compelling character. He's basically playing the stand-in for Djimon Hounsou's character in the original movie, where he's kind of not necessarily a mentor, but definitely a guiding light for the character. Obviously, in the original movie, Djimon Hounsou was playing a fellow slave. In this movie, Denzel is playing the slave owner, the slave trader. But Denzel, he did a great job. As for Pedro Pascal, he is playing the top Roman general that attacked Mescal's new home in the opening sequence. And I've actually thought Pascal was also very, very good. This is one of the best things I've ever seen him do. I've always liked Pedro Pascal, but I've never loved Pedro Pascal. I actually thought Pascal did a very good job. Connie Nielsen returns from the original movie. She's fine. She basically, she's playing Lucilla, Maximus's ex-lover and Lucius's mother. Again, she's fine. It's a standard motherly role. Nothing really extraordinary there. But she does a decent job with her emotional scenes. However, the performances I thought were awful. Truly horrible performances were from Joseph Quinn and Fred Hechinger as the twin emperors, the new emperors of Rome. I'm quite a big fan of Joseph Quinn and Fred Hechinger. Joseph Quinn was on Stranger Things. He was Eddie on Stranger Things. I thought he was great there. And he impressed me yet again earlier this year with A Quiet Place Day One, where I thought he did a great job. And as for Fred Hechinger, he was in season 1 of The White Lotus. I thought he was really good there. So I enjoy both of these actors quite a bit, but I thought they were embarrassingly bad in this movie. They're basically playing crazier versions of Commodus, Joaquin Phoenix's character from the original, and they do not have the depth and nuance of Phoenix's performance, and they're not even close. It felt like Ridley Scott kind of told them to be crazy and then didn't direct them beyond that point. As the movie reveals in the second half, this is a non-spoiler review, but they pave the way for a different character to end up being the villain as opposed to the emperors. So I understand that Quinn and Hechinger's characters were simply, basically pawns on the larger chessboard. They weren't playing the game. So I understand that they were basically means to an end. But if you are playing the emperors in a sequel to Gladiator, where the emperor in said film was Joaquin Phoenix, I expect a better performance. Commodus played off as crazy but controlled. Phoenix played the character as a very controlled, but as a very controlled psychopath, let's put it that way. Whereas Quinn and Hechinger play their emperors as just nuts. And it was not interesting to watch, and it wasn't really fun to dive deeper. On top of the fact that they're very underwritten characters. Now, I did like where the characters ended up. It plays into the Romulus and Remus theme of the movie of twins. I thought that was kind of compelling. I can't elaborate without getting into spoilers. I thought that where the characters ended up was really, really interesting. But overall, those characters just really fell flat for me. That's pretty much it when it comes to acting. So let's move into the story. The basic setup is that Maximus's son, Lucius, ran away from home after the events of the original Gladiator largely because his mother feared for his own safety. So he fled to Africa, where he fell in love and grew up as a fighter. And he is eventually put into slavery and brought back to Rome to fight in the Colosseum in the gladiatorial games. And Lucius has to struggle with the fact that he really doesn't know if he wants to continue his father's legacy or not. It's a pretty good setup for a sequel. However, I never really felt like it was an amazing idea that was truly necessary. And that's my biggest issue with this movie. I think you can definitely make the argument that Gladiator 2 did not need to be made. And for a lot of people, that will be enough to skip it. However, in my opinion, the acting, the special effects, which we'll get to in a second, and again, some really interesting themes about twins and the like, were enough to make this a really, really cool movie and something worth seeing on the big screen as intended. The movie definitely ends with a strong setup for a third Gladiator movie. Again, a lot of people aren't going to like the idea of this being a major franchise. However, when it came to this, the ending of this movie actually reminded me a bit of the most recent Planet of the Apes movie, which I understand is a very odd comparison. But please, if you'll indulge me, hear me out. I really liked the most recent Planet of the Apes movie, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, largely because it was definitely a continuation of an ongoing story that I was a fan of. I loved the most recent Planet of the Apes trilogy. Kingdom was a sequel to said trilogy. And I found that movie to be a really interesting franchise film, largely because a lot of franchise films these days are very bland. They're very boring. They're very formulaic. And they don't really do a lot to justify their existence. But I felt the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, while it fell into a lot of the franchisey tropes of modern Hollywood, in the end, I felt Kingdom had a lot of twists that justified its existence, and I was really interested to see further continuations of the story. I feel the exact same way about Gladiator 2. There's a shot at the end of this movie that, again, well, I guess I can't say this. It basically showcases Lucius wearing Russell Crowe's armor from the original film. And I saw this image, and I said to myself in my head, I was like, man, this movie feels franchisey. Man, this movie feels like modern Hollywood. The son getting the outfit of the father. However, in the end, I felt the movie had enough interesting elements and enough really great elements from a story perspective and a writing perspective, particularly in the second half, that I actually really, really enjoyed it, and I would be down for a third film if this movie makes enough money. This movie's going to have to make a lot of money to justify its production budget. It currently has a budget of $250 million, so it's going to have to make $700 million plus at the global box office to really justify the production of Gladiator 3. But I hope that they make a third movie, because I would absolutely watch it, and I would be excited to watch it. That's really all I can say right now without spoilers, but I thought it was really, really cool. Last thing I want to touch on is the visual effects. One of the best parts of the first Gladiator movie is how good the movie looks. They built all of the sets, they constructed all of the costumes, and the movie looks absolutely stunning from top to bottom. This movie looks very good, but can you see a lot of the digital effects that they put into the movie. There are a lot of action sequences, particularly in the first half, where Lucius and his fellow slaves turned gladiators have to fight animals, largely baboons, rhinos, and sharks. They put sharks in the Colosseum. Don't ask. It's weird but fun. And man, are they digital. They are very, very fake, which was a real letdown because, again, of how good the first movie looks, as well as how good parts of this movie itself looks. A lot of the visual effects are, I want to be clear, absolutely hypnotic. It really does look like the Colosseum is filled with people. The people looked real. The Colosseum looked real. Those visual effects I thought were stunning. However, a lot of the animals didn't really look didn't look good. But overall, the movie looks great. It's well directed. It's well shot. A lot of the color correction could have been better. There were a couple scenes where the shot was a little too white for my liking. I would have liked the shot to be a little more desaturized so that you could be a little more immersed in ancient Rome. But overall, it really felt like a Shakespearean drama from the 50s or 60s coming to life in 2024. And I thought that was really, really cool. So that's pretty much it when it comes to Gladiator 2. Again, a very, very respectable sequel that is not as good as the original film. If you like the first movie, or in the case like me, you love it, I think you will really enjoy it. I think it will deliver what you want it to deliver. It has the action, it has the political intrigue, it has the production design, it has the performances. It's not as good as the first one. The first one I would consider to be a 5 out of 5 Best Picture contender, top awards contender. This one was an above average blockbuster, which is good and really enjoyable and, in my opinion, worth your time, but it's not going to have the long-term staying power of the original Gladiator, which is going to result in a lot of people arguing that it shouldn't have been made. But in my opinion, an above-average blockbuster is worth being made, so I'm glad it was made, and I hope we get a third entry in the franchise. So that's pretty much it for this week of The Real Takes. Next week, we will be talking about Cobra Kai. I know I said last week that we were going to talk about Cobra Kai, but I actually did not have time this week to finish the series. And when I was looking at what I was going to talk about next week, I realized that there were no movies that I wanted to talk about because, I'm sorry guys, I'm not going to talk about Moana 2. I know I'm breaking your hearts by not talking about Moana 2 or Wicked, but I don't want to watch Moana 2. So as a result, I need something to talk about. We're going to talk about Cobra Kai next week. So sorry for the delay on that, but I want to make sure that I give Cobra Kai the time that it deserves. I don't want to, kind of watch it out of the corner of my eye. I want to make sure that I'm in a setting where I can really pay attention and digest the show as it unfolds. So next week will be Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2. I hope you'll join me for that. Until then, this has been the Real Takes Podcast here on WSVC Radio. I'm your host, Dan Sisk, and we will see you next week.
Hey there, listeners. I'm Matt Boyer, station manager of WSVC Radio. If you like what you're listening to, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and hit that bell button to be notified with all of our newest updates. Every day, one of our shows is releasing a new episode. Stick around and stay tuned.